Hi everyone. We're going to talk a little bit about your first essay today, which is the interpretive analysis. The interpretive analysis is going to be on one of the short stories we read for class. So even though it's not due until early March, you want to kind of keep in mind that this is your first big essay assignment as you're reading the stories, so you can start choosing the story you want to work on. So once you pick one of the stories assigned in our syllabus, you're going to write an essay of at least 3 complete pages that argues for an interpretation of the story's meaning. Make sure that you read over in your textbook about interpretive analyses, and then also the information in the week 2 folder is going to be really helpful in helping you get that together. So your essay is going to need to include a thesis statement, unified paragraphs, good logical organization, including transitional phrases, and most importantly, direct quotations from the story itself to support your claims. You do not have to use outside research for this paper, but if you decide to use outside research, it must be from the PGCC library or databases. So the things to watch out for is that your essay should not spend unnecessary time on plot summary. You should assume that we've all read the story and you don't need to tell us what it's about, other than to give context to your quotations. The other thing is you can't use non-library sources, especially not SparkNotes, Shmoop, or any of the other cheat sites that aren't allowed for this course. Everything needs to be cited in correct MLA format. And then you're going to submit these to the Dropbox online by 5 p.m. March 6th in an MS Word file. So let's talk a little bit about what an interpretive analysis is and how you can go about writing this paper easier. The goals of an interpretive analysis is first and foremost to provide an interpretation of meaning, specifically to provide your interpretation of meaning. And to do that, you're going to explain how a part of the text, some aspect of the story, whether it's formal or stylistic or even the historical context, works with the story as a whole to create meaning. Often we do this to clarify the argument that the text is presenting or showing us about a certain topic. So I'm going to kind of walk you through some hints and tips now for this assignment. The first step, as always, is to just read the story and make note of any places that interest or confuse you. The kind of gut reaction to the story is a good starting place for where you want to work on your interpretation. Step 2, once you've gotten through the story once, is to reread it. And this time you're going to be looking for specific quotations that strike you as important, whether they are quotations that repeat ideas, quotations that are just weird or interesting ways of describing something, or quotations that seem to discuss the topic that you're interested in. After you do that, step 3 is to organize your thoughts. I personally tend to write out the quotes that I want to use. I find this much, much easier than flipping back and forth through the story itself. I tend to use index cards because I like that I can shuffle them around as opposed to a piece of paper where you just have to list them in a row. The goal here, though, is to group the quotes that seem to relate to each other. So in a story, for instance, like The Story of an Hour, you might have quotes about marriage, quotes about being a woman, quotes about fear, quotes about powerlessness, and you want to be able to put them into groups so that you're going to be able to organize your paragraphs. After you do that, you want to think about what you see the story as commenting on or arguing. So this is not about the author's intentions, right? It's not about what the author is trying to do or what the author thinks he or she is doing. Instead, interpretation is what you read in the story. And remember, you get to bring your own experiences to it, so your argument can come out of that as well. Step 5 is to create a thesis that states a claim about the story's meaning. So remember, your thesis has to be arguable, which means it shouldn't be plot summary. The best way to do this is to try to relate a part of the story to the whole story. So you might choose one or more of the formal elements, which are plot, setting, point of view, or character. You might choose stylistic elements like imagery or symbolism. Or you might decide to relate the story to its historical context and explain how understanding that historical context helps us understand the story. There's lots of ways to approach this. The idea, though, is that you want to get beyond just telling us what happens in the story and making an argument about what the story seems to be saying about a certain topic. Once you've come up with your claim, you need to check it and make sure that all the aspects of the story don't contradict your claim. Now, just because there's one part of a story that seems to contradict your claim doesn't mean your claim can't be usable. It means that you have to figure out how to explain that aspect to your reader. Step 7 is that you gather your evidence. So this is where making those index cards or listing out the quotes is going to be really helpful, because pulling them out of the story lets you see what you have to work with. The big thing here is you're going to discard the quotes or the parts of the story that don't directly relate to your argument. When you go through and you read and reread, you're going to tend to find more than you can use for these short papers. So don't be afraid to not talk about everything that you thought was interesting. Remember, if you need outside sources for context like history, you need to support that with evidence as well. So make sure that you're using the library databases to find those sources. Step 8, go ahead and plan and draft. And everybody does this their own way. But the big thing is that you're building your essay based on the thesis statement. So if we think of a thesis statement as claims plus reasons, your paragraph should be based around those reasons and ordered in the same way that your thesis is ordered. Step 9, this is where you're going to revise and review. You want to check and make sure that there are no floating quotations. All of your quotations should be introduced with context and then analyzed and explained, because your reader might see something different in the quote that you do. This is also where you want to check and make sure you're not just doing plot summary. And then step 10, finally, you're going to edit and proofread. Be sure that you're using MLA formats. If you're unfamiliar with MLA format, there are some other videos available in the week 3 folders so that you can look over that as well. But the other place you can find it is in your handbook. So once you go through those steps, you'll have a good, strong first draft of your interpretive analysis. If you have any questions, don't forget to post them.